Hello everyone, welcome to Kids Auto and Truck Repair. Today we have a 2000 Honda Accord with a 3.0 liter. This vehicle came from my Bishop's office. Bishop's shop. Bishop was working on this. He replaced a couple parts and he brought it to me so we can figure out what's going on with this. The code is P0505 idle air control valve trouble code, and Bishop is going to tell us what he did, and then we will pick it back from there. So, Bishop.
Sure. A calibrated throttle position center is new aftermarket. An aftermarket new idle air control valve. Throttle body has been cleaned. Denso map sensor has been replaced. Smoke test has been done.
No vacuum leaks.
No vacuum leaks that I could find.
And you also replaced the throttle body gasket, right?
Throttle body gasket, and of course the gaskets associated with the IAC valve and TPS sensor.
Okay.
Surges and throws the 505 permanent when it's thoroughly heated up.
Thoroughly heated up, okay. And also the EGR valve was replaced as well.
Yes, with aftermarket.
Okay, perfect. So Bishop has done all this work. These components have been replaced. The code is still there. The check engine light is not on right now. I was going to show you, but the code is saved in the computer memory. Pending. So it's pending right now. We have a pending code in memory. I'm going to show you the code on the scan tool, and then we're going to talk about where we're going to go so we can fix whatever that's causing this code to remain on. So, Bishop,
you're the man.
Let's see. So we got our scan tool here. I'm going to show you guys the code first. Let's go to engine. This has AC. Let's go to trouble codes. Okay, so when we read our permanent codes, we don't have any code here. But when we go to temporary codes, our P0505 code is here. All right, so our code is there. Now what I want to do is I'm going to show you what Bishop has replaced. So as you can see, this map sensor is new. As you can see, it says Denso on it. Our throttle position sensor is new. Our idle air control valve down there is new too. This gasket was replaced. The EGR valve, this was replaced. This is new as well.
Standard motor products, Walker, Denso.
Okay. Do you think those components are good?
We're going to find out.
We're going to find out, Bishop. Okay. Sounds good. We're going to find out. Now, what I want to do is I want to familiarize myself with this trouble code. I mean, I have an idea of how this idle air control valve works, but I would like to, no, actually, let's go back. I'm kind of jumping the gun here. Let's click on diagnose and see if we have a TSB about this code. We have a TSB about this. Let's read about this TSB. Let's see if we have any useful info here. So nothing pretty useful here. It's just telling us about this tool that they're using here. So this TSB is not really helpful. So let's back out. And on the top repairs, we have some recommendations here. The first one is replace idle air control valve. Second one is replace throttle body gasket. So all these recommendations here have basically been done. So this is what you did.
Yes, everything except replaced the entire throttle body.
Yeah, except the entire throttle. So,
and we still have the surging when hot.
Yeah, so it only surges when it's hot.
Yes.
So interesting. So let's go back. Now what I want to do is I want to look at some data PIDs, and then we're going to start the engine, and hopefully we can get this engine to act up while we have it here. And so let's see. Let's go to data. So I'm interested in all the data PIDs that say something about idle air control. So we have all these PIDs. Actually, it went back to the PIDs that I selected before I turned on the camera. So guys, I did look at this really quickly before I turned on the camera. So the scan tool just saved all the PIDs that I selected just a moment ago. So I'm going to graph our idle air control. We have the engine coolant temperature sensor data PID, the intake air temperature sensor, the map, sensor data pid. I hope you guys can see the PIDs that we have selected here. I'm sorry for the glare. So now we're gonna start the engine. We're gonna let it idle, and hopefully this engine is gonna surge right here in the shop so we can figure out what's going on. So Bishop is gonna start it for us.
It might take a while for it to...
Oh, to get hot. So as you can hear, the engine is running. Right now it sounds pretty good. So when the engine got first started, our idle air control valve percentage went up to 55%. So we went up and now it's going down, it's stabilizing. Okay, so we're gonna watch it. So far so good. Everything looks good so far. This percentage should be at 8% or 10% at idle.
EGR?
Idle.
IAC?
Yeah, IAC. Yeah. So it's showing 15% now. So let's observe it and see what happens. So our map sensor is good. Now this over here is a vacuum number. So we have 0.9 volts. That's good. So watch this, Bishop. Right now we have 0.9 volts. So 900 millivolts. When I see a low voltage number on the map, this tells me that we have vacuum on the tip of the map over here. So that's a vacuum reading. Now I'm gonna snap the throttle. As I snap the throttle, this number is gonna increase. So watch that. Do you see that number go up?
Yes, indeed.
So that's how I can quickly test a map sensor. Actually, I'm gonna graph it so we can see. This map sensor has a reference voltage of 5 volts. So when there is atmospheric pressure, which happens at wide open throttle, our voltage should increase up to like 3-4 volts.
Yeah, makes sense.
And then when the throttle closes, we have vacuum in the intake, it should go down. Yeah. So this is, just based on the readings I have here, I don't even have to scope the map sensor. I know it works. Just based on these numbers. Yeah, so I know the map works and I know the wiring is good too. So it means our signal from the map is good. So it's getting to the computer. The computer is what is seeing the change. So we're gonna watch it. Hopefully it's gonna start surging now.
1500 RPM.
1500 RPM? So the RPM is high.
Yeah.
Okay, let me see if I can put the engine RPM here. Yeah, so the idle is high.
Yep.
So was the original complaint high idle?
No, surging.
Oh, surging.
Yeah, and the 505.
How is it doing that? It won't let me go back to the full list. So it shows me the full list. Watch, and then it goes back to the. Okay, let me do this. Let me do it this way. Let's just grab my engine RPM here, and then show this again. So our engine RPM is high. So right now we have 1400, which is too high.
Yeah.
So maybe instead of waiting until it starts surging,
AC is down to 1.
so our idle air control valve is down to 1. You know, the other thing that can do this can be a vacuum leak. If we have a vacuum leak somewhere, that can cause the idle to be high. Because right now, the computer is trying to close the idle air control valve to decrease the engine speed.
Yes.
That's why it's all the way down to 1, but our engine speed is still high. So there is a possibility that we could have a vacuum leak somewhere.
Is this EGR working correctly?
The EGR...
Valve. I don't know if
that's a good question. I wonder if we have an EGR percentage. Yeah, because you think the EGR is kind of sticking.
because I smoke tested it and didn't see an external smoke.
No external smoke on the engine side.
So is the EGR leaking internally?
That's a good question. Let's see, let's disconnect it and see if it's gonna help. Okay, let me see if we have an EGR percentage data PID. That's a good point, Bishop, because we could have an EGR valve that's sticking. Okay, I think that's all we have in terms of EGR. Okay, let me disconnect this EGR
this guy
valve.
hasn't budged, the 1.13.
Not at all. So I disconnected the EGR valve. I mean, the voltage went down on the EGR data PID. I don't think it's the EGR, because if the EGR was sticking after we disconnect it, it would go, unless it's just completely stuck. I don't think so. No. All right, guys. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm going to reconnect the EGR valve. Bishop, can you please turn off the engine for us? So let's see how we're gonna fix this. Okay. Can you turn the key on, please?
Key on.
Yes. I'm going to, although Bishop already smoke tested it, I want to smoke test it again just to double check. I'm gonna bring up my smoke machine. Let's smoke test it. We're gonna block all these ports over here. If we don't have a vacuum leak, then the next thing I'm gonna do, I'm going to scope this idle air control valve. I'm gonna look at the voltages and the signal that we have at the idle air control valve. So since it's new, I'm not gonna check it yet. Let's make sure we don't have a vacuum leak, and then we'll get back to the idle air control valve. I'm gonna get my smoke machine set up, and then I'll bring you guys back up. Because at this point, what would cause that? Because the computer is definitely trying to adjust the idle air control valve to lower the RPM, which is not happening because it's going all the way down to 1, but our engine RPM is staying high, which tells me that we probably have unmetered air entering in the intake from somewhere. I don't know.
But here's the question.
Yes.
Why does it start to surge at only a certain point? Why does the computer try even harder when it gets really hot to try and bring that idle back down? And then it surges.
And then it surges. That's a good question. After we smoke the intake, if we don't have a vacuum leak, then I'm going to focus on the idle air control valve, because the computer could be telling it to close. Maybe the mechanical movement is not happening. Maybe it's not closing.
Could well be.
So it could be. I mean, we can also test it. I mean, there's a test we can do. We can remove it and send power and ground to it to see how, how well it goes in and out, because we can watch that plunger. Because the computer opens and closes it. So if the computer is telling you to close and it's not closing and it's staying wide open and allowing more air to enter the intake to increase the engine RPMs,
that's your problem.
That could be the problem. So we need to test that and confirm that's what's happening. But before we do that, let's smoke it first. So I'm going to bring up the smoke machine, and then I'll bring you guys back up. So we have our smoke machine connected to the intake of the vehicle. We blocked this tube over here. So now we're just gonna wait and see if we have a leak somewhere. So we're just gonna wait and see where smoke is gonna come out of. Yeah. And then I'll bring you guys over here under the hood so I can show you how we connected the smoke machine to the intake manifold. So let's wait and see. Yeah, I think it's gonna take a little while. So I see smoke leaking out around the EGR valve. I'm gonna bring you under the hood so I can show it to you. I have my smoke machine connected to this tube. Back here, I disconnected a hose that connects straight into the intake manifold, and I'm blocking this hose here with a bolt, so we know that we have smoke going inside the intake manifold. Now, as we are observing this, look at what I see here. I hope you can see this smoke. You see that? Yeah, I hope the camera is picking this up. There is smoke coming out of the EGR valve. So we don't have any smoke anywhere else. So we don't have a leak anywhere else. And our check ball on the smoke machine is dropping. So we don't have a large leak around the intake. We have a small leak and our leak is right here. Now, is this EGR valve supposed to leak? No, I don't think so. So this is our problem, guys.
And it's leaking towards the top of the valve,
Towards not on the bottom, okay? So I still have the hose that goes to the brake booster disconnected. We don't have smoke coming out of here because we have a check valve on that side of the intake. So the only leak we have is the EGR valve. I think we found our problem. What do you think, Bishop?
I think you're dead on. Explain why you did the smoke test after the MAP sensor as opposed to before the throttle plate.
That's a great question. So Bishop wants me to explain why I installed the smoke machine after the throttle as opposed to installing it before the throttle. Well, I did that because I got burnt so many times, okay? Because if you install your smoke machine before the throttle, chances are you're not gonna have enough smoke inside the intake manifold. So you can miss some leaks, you can miss some spots. Because if your throttle body is sealing properly around the throttle bore, you're just gonna have smoke between the throttle and the air filter box. It's gonna be too tight. So you're just gonna have maybe a little bit of smoke going in, and it's not gonna go in all the ports to like check the entire intake. Because I got burnt so many times and I learned that, and now after I learned that trick, what I do when I smoke test any intake, I always like to position or connect my smoke machine after the throttle. Because if you connect it after the throttle, this tells me that I have smoke going inside the intake, throughout the entire intake, gaskets and everything. Because the leak that we have over here, think about it, the smoke is going into the intake manifold and it's making its way back to the valve, and any opening it's gonna find, that's where it's gonna leak from. Now, we know that this vehicle is only act up intermittently, only when it gets hot. So the EGR valve only opens when the engine or the cylinder temperatures are elevated. So that's when the EGR valve opens to allow the recirculated exhaust gases to go into the intake and eventually in the cylinders to cool down the cylinders internally. Now, if we have a valve that's sticking, between the plunger itself and the bore, if it's sticking and allowing exhaust gases to enter the intake at the wrong time, that can cause the idle to surge. I'm not sure we should have smoke coming out of this valve, so we're gonna go ahead and replace the valve. But before we wrap up this diagnosis, I would like to, just for kind of gigs and giggles, like they say, I want to check the idle air control valve with a lab scope. I'm gonna back probe all the 3 wires. This idle air control valve is a 3-wire valve, so it's gonna have 1 ground and 2 powers coming from the computer. So the computer sends power on 1 wire to push the valve to close, and then it's gonna send power on the other wire to open it. So it kind of goes back and forth like this to open and close, and it's duty cycled. So we're gonna check those voltages, the signals here at the valve. If everything looks good, I also wanna block this tube over here that goes to the booster, just in case we have a booster that's leaking. I don't think that's the issue here, but it's always good to just
easy to check.
Yeah, easy to check, and let's just eliminate any possibility that can cause this problem to occur, and then we should be good. So I don't have to show you these boring parts. I'm gonna back probe all these wires, and then we're done with our smoke machine, right? We can remove the smoke machine. We know we have smoke leaking out of the EGR valve, so this valve is gonna get replaced. Because think about it, guys, earlier when we started it, the idle was high, and our percentage on the idle air control valve was being dropped to almost 0. So the computer is trying to close the valve, but the idle, because what controls the idle on this MAP engine is the amount of air you have inside the intake. So if there's unmetered air going in through somewhere, which is happening through this EGR valve, it's gonna cause that. I'm going to back probe the wires at the idle air control valve, and then I'll bring you guys back up so we can check the idle air control valve, and then we should be done. So I got my lab scope out and I have it connected and everything. I have all my traces on the voltage scale. So what you're looking at here is the voltage that we have at the idle air control valve. I'm back probing all the wires. So all 3 wires at the idle air control valve are back probed. The key is on in the vehicle right now. We have some type of command right now with the key on. So this over here tells me that our wiring is good. The wiring of the idle air control valve is good. These are the voltages that we have. Our blue trace is the ground. Okay, so our ground looks good. It's not elevated. Perfect. So now we're gonna start the engine. So Bishop is gonna go in the vehicle and start it for us. I'm blocking this tube that goes to the brake booster. Yes, sir. You can go ahead and start it. Okay, so it looks like our duty cycle here is about 50%. So you see, as I'm starting, look at these pulses. You see how they're getting bigger? Watch this. They get smaller as I increase the engine RPMs. So the wiring is good. The computer is definitely trying to control the idle. Now, the other thing I want to do is, let me see if I can manually turn it on and off. Let me go to scanner. Let's see if we have a functional test here that will allow us to hydro air control valve test. Option is not available for this vehicle. What?
Too old.
I guess my snap-on is limited when it comes to this. So here's what I'm gonna do. Let's go back to the scope. Let's try the RTL tool. I'm gonna connect the RTL tool to the vehicle and then I'll bring you guys back up. I wanna control the idle air control valve with the scan tool. I wanna turn it on and off while we watch the voltage on the scope to see how nice it's gonna open and close. So I'm gonna get the RTL connected to the car and then I'll bring you guys back up. We turned off the engine. We looked at the voltage at the idle air control valve. Everything looks good. The wiring is good. We connected our RTL tool to the vehicle to see if we can command the valve to close and open with the tool. But unfortunately, we cannot do that. Okay, so the tool is not allowing us to open the valve, because what I wanted to do was I was gonna open and close the valve with the scan tool and watch our voltages on the scope. Or we could have also removed it and look at the mechanical movement on the plunger of the valve as we command it on and off with the scan tool. But unfortunately, our scan tool does not allow us to do that. Actually, let me make sure I am inside the engine computer. I already did this off camera. So I want to bring you guys up to speed and show you what we did.
Oh, the key's off.
Is the key off? Okay.
Oh no, it's on, I'm sorry.
Key is on? Perfect. So I did erase the code off camera, so we shouldn't have any codes in the engine computer. When we go to active test, so idle adjust, so I'm going to click on idle adjust. So it's telling us something about the adjust screw, which this vehicle doesn't have. So this doesn't apply to this car. Okay, so at this point, the scan tool is kind of useless. It's not gonna show us anything. So I believe our problem here is this EGR valve. The valve is leaking. Okay, we're gonna replace this valve. Once we replace the valve, this should be fixed. What do you think, Bishop?
I agree.
You agree? Yeah. Because at this point, you know, the throttle was cleaned, the map is new, the throttle position sensor is calibrated and is new. The idle air control valve is new. We don't have a vacuum leak around this area. We do have one over here at the EGR valve, and this valve is aftermarket. What else could it be?
And it's, you know, the leak is activated when it's hot.
When it's hot, yeah. So I believe, you know, maybe that leak is getting even bigger when it's hot, you know, between the plunger and the bore, and it's allowing more air to enter the intake, which is messing up the idle speed and everything. Because if you remember, the code said that there was a problem in the idle air control system, not the idle air control valve.
Necessarily.
So yeah, so it says something in the system. So there's unmetered air entering the intake. All right, guys, so we're gonna leave this right over here. Let us know in the comment section how you could have tackled this. If there's something we missed, if you could have done it differently, let us know. Maybe there's something we missed, or maybe there's another way of doing this. Bishop, you think we missed something?
Dale, you are the man.
Thank you, Bishop. So, guys, let us know if you have a question for me or for Bishop. You'll be seeing Bishop a lot more here on the channel. Bishop, you need to come more in the shop, okay? It was just so much fun because Bishop thinks outside the box, and I always like to think about these systems because it's one thing to replace a component and call it a day, but it's another to take the time to think about how components work. You know, we learn every day. I learn every day. I always like to figure out why things go bad and what they cause when they go bad. So I'm gonna leave this right over here. I hope you like this video. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like the video, give it a thumb down and tell us why, okay? If this is your first time, subscribe to the channel here. Ring the bell so you can get notified every time I upload a new video. If you have any comments, questions, criticism, maybe there's something we missed, let us know. If you're a Honda specialist, you work a lot on these Hondas and you know these Hondas like the back of your hand, let us know what we should do or how we should have done this. Thanks for watching. See you next time. So we are back on this Honda Accord. Bishop has fixed it. Bishop, can you tell us what you did?
Oh my goodness. After 2 aftermarket new idle air control valves, Dale said, look, you got to do OEM. We got OEM Denso reman, put it in. Actually, prior to that, we plugged the port right in front of the throttle plate here, and that instantly dropped the RPM.
Oh yeah, remember that one test that you did? Yeah.
Strongly suggesting that the IAC was leaking.
Yeah, because after plugging the port, then the idle air control, the idle went down. Okay.
That's right.
The engine RPM went down. Okay.
Put the reman IAC valve in, and no codes, nothing since.
No codes. Wow.
Great.
Perfect. It's fixed now.
It's fixed.
Awesome. So just to recap about what Bishop has said, we did some tests last time. The EGR was leaking. We actually sent smoke on the back of the intake. We saw smoke coming out of the EGR valve. We thought it was the EGR valve. Actually, Bishop replaced the EGR valve. After replacing that, the idle speed did not go low enough. So we talked about it again. We were like, it's probably somewhere else. And then we talked about blocking the port of the idle valve right there. And then the idle speed went down. Yes. Then we were like, okay, so that's where the problem is. And then Bishop decided to now go OEM. Like I always tell him, it's hard to get Bishop to get OEM parts sometimes. No, I'm just kidding.
Right.
We got an OEM part. We installed the OEM part, and now it's good to go. So I'm going to bring you here under the hood. I'm going to show you the OEM idle air control valve. I guess what we can learn from this video is you have to be careful about aftermarket parts.
No way around it.
Yes, because it's like, you know, I get burned a lot. I mean, I've gotten burnt a lot by these aftermarket parts. Now I always try to install, especially electronic parts, I always go with OEM, although they're expensive. But it's like, it saves me time and it also saves the customer money in the long run. So I'm going to show you this new idle air control valve that Bishop has installed. And also, should we go ahead and install the EGR valve? Yeah, because when this old EGR valve was leaking, we thought it was the EGR valve. We want to install this old EGR valve here on the vehicle to see if it's going to change anything. I don't think it will, but just, we're also learning here. You know, let's see what it does. We're going to show you how to remove that. So I'm going to bring everyone here under the hood. We're going to show you the new idle air control valve, and then Bishop is going to replace that EGR valve for us.
We leak tested this replacement good EGR valve, and it did not leak.
It did not leak. Oh, okay.
It did not
That's
leak.
actually another question that we had last time. We were like, is this normal? Is it supposed to leak or not? And I was like, no, it shouldn't leak. So it's good to know. Now we know if you ever smoke test this engine, you should not see smoke coming out of the EGR.
Out of the top here.
Yeah, out of the top of the valve. So if smoke comes out of the EGR valve, it means your EGR valve is bad. But I guess that leak on the EGR valve was not big enough. I mean, we don't know that yet.
We had no EGR codes.
Yeah, we had no EGR codes, yes. Yeah. So let's see what we have here under the hood. So here is the old EGR valve that Bishop installed. So we're going to remove it and install this one over here. Actually, Bishop brought the EGR valve that he removed and the idle air control valve. Here it is. Okay, now here is the OEM one. I hope you guys can see it right there.
And this is the aftermarket.
So this is the OEM idle air control valve, and after you replaced the idle air control valve, everything was fine. And we checked the wiring last time with the scope. The voltages that we saw on the wiring were all good. So based on the voltages that I saw last time, that's how I knew that the problem could be the valve itself, because we had good power and good ground at the valve. Okay, so Bishop, should we go ahead and install that one and see what happens?
It's real quick.
Okay, perfect. Let's do that.
I think it's on with, I don't know, 12 or 13 pounds.
Oh, there you go. Perfect.
Oh, too light there, Todd. I don't think I tightened it enough.
What was the torque spec?
I think it was teens.
Oh, okay. That's not bad. Perfect. So here comes the EGR valve. Just two 12 millimeter nuts that hold it. Perfect. Now we're gonna install our old EGR valve. Yeah, actually Bishop wrote bad on it, so
leaking.
Yeah.
Aftermarket, and I believe the one that does not leak. The reason it was replaced was because we did have an EGR code in sufficient flow, and figured let's just replace it rather than try and clean it. And sure enough, we replaced it with one that leaks.
Interesting.
Yes, leaks. No more EGR codes. In other words, the flow was okay, but it leaks.
But it leaks. Wow. So when you replace this EGR valve, your EGR flow codes went away.
Yes, sir.
But it just leaks a little bit.
It leaks a little bit, and so now we want to find out, is that enough to trigger?
Or to cause the idle to be high. And if it doesn't change, are you just going to leave it on? What are you going to do?
That's a good question. What do you recommend?
I don't know. I mean,
I would be inclined to put this one back.
Oh, put that one back.
I don't like leaks, right?
Yeah, that's true.
You know?
Yeah, I agree.
And we'll just tell the customer, hey,
you might need an OEM EGR someday.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's probably a little expensive too.
Yeah, 280 something.
Wow.
I mean,
perfect.
Okay.
Nice. Now, one thing we forgot to mention is that, I mean, maybe we should have started the engine to kind of show you how nice the idle is now. So the idle actually got a lot better after the OEM idle air control valve was installed.
No surging, and
no
now
surging.
Consistently 600, 650.
Perfect. Okay, so we got the old EGR back on. So now let's start the engine and see what happens. All right, guys, so as you can hear, the engine is running, the idle speed is very low. The engine sounds great.
It does.
Sounds great. So the problem was a bad idle air control valve. Yeah. I'm gonna take you in the vehicle. Let me show you. Let me show you the dash. As you can see, we don't have any lights on the dash. No check engine light. Okay. Our idle speed is normal. So we're good to go.
So this tells us that even with a small vacuum leak out the top of the EGR valve, that's not enough apparently to affect the idle.
The idle, yes. Yes. That's something we have learned. So that leak we had on the EGR valve wasn't big enough to affect the idle.
And it was very visible.
Yes.
With your smoke.
Yes. The engine sounds great. We have installed the OEM EGR, I mean the aftermarket. We have installed the aftermarket EGR valve that was leaking before. It didn't change the idle speed. Now, you asked me what I would recommend. Since this is new, although it's aftermarket, I would leave the aftermarket on. The reason being is, since that one was giving you EGR flow codes, I'm suspecting that it was sticking.
Indeed.
Maybe it was sticking a little bit. So if we leave this on the vehicle, eventually it's gonna start sticking again. Then you have EGR flow codes. I would keep this one on. I believe this is not gonna stick, but we know between the plunger and the board is probably a little bit of excessive clearance there. That's why we had smoke leaking out of it, but it's not big enough to affect the idle. I would leave it on, but I would notify the customer and I would be like, hey, we put an aftermarket EGR valve in it. At some point it may give us issues, but we don't know when. So if it comes back, just know that if it ever comes back, we're gonna install the OEM EGR. That way the customer kind of knows a little bit,
Yeah.
and if it comes back, then we can just...
I like your logic.
Yeah.
Because this is known dirty. Now I did try and clean it, but I mean...
Yeah, you
it's gonna-
can't really get all the soot
Exactly.
out of it, all the...
Right.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the lifespan between these two compared, I gotta favor this guy,
Yeah.
even though it's got the leak, because
If-
it's cleaner.
It's cleaner, yeah, that's for sure. And yes, it's probably not gonna stick. It's probably gonna last a little bit longer than that one.
Agreed.
So, although I don't really like aftermarket stuff, but I would go with this one over that one over there.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, yeah.
Good job, Bishop. You fixed it.
No. Yeah. I just follow behind you, buddy.
That's awesome. Well, we can turn off the engine and then we're gonna wrap up this video. So any last words, Bishop?
It's a pleasure.
What can you tell our let's make sure Bishop is here, we can see you.
It's a pleasure.
Any last words?
This guy's diagnostics ability is unparalleled.
Thank you.
It's fun.
Thank you. It's always fun to have you here in the shop, Bishop. And yeah, so I guess what I can learn from this, which I have learned a couple years ago, is, again, I've said this so many times, I'm going to keep saying it, when it comes to electronic components, sensors, electric motors, ideally you want to use OEM parts. And then if you can get OEM, then get aftermarket, but just, know that the aftermarket parts can still leave you stranded. Two of them. Yeah, you installed two
Two aftermarket
new and still didn't fix it. So this is a good lesson to be learned here to those of you that, that still trust aftermarket parts. Bishop just said that he's going to convert to the OEM church.
Yeah. I mean,
You can't go wrong with OEM. Now, there are cases where you can still have OEM parts that are defective out of the box. I actually have a video on a VW coming up. I got a part from VW and it was bad. It actually had me second guess myself a little bit. We had to go back and get another one and it worked. So you never know what you get nowadays. Some parts we get sometimes are just bad and crap out of the box. So everyone, get in the comment box. Let us know what you think about this repair that Bishop has made. If you were fixing this, what you would have done differently. Maybe there's something we missed. Maybe there's a different way of doing this. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't, give it a thumb down. But if you give us a thumb down, you gotta tell us why so we can make better videos in the future. If this is your first time here, subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell so you can get notified every time I upload a new video. If you have a question for Bishop, let us know in the comment section. Bishop, any last words?
pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you guys. See you next time.